I used to believe that if I kept going long enough, working long enough, and earning enough, the quiet ache inside me would finally disappear. My name is John. I am 88 years old, and I made millions in my lifetime, but I still find myself wondering how I ended up so alone despite all of it. What I never understood back then was that success can fill a house, but it does not always fill a heart. When I was young, I did not think much about happiness in the way people talk about it now. I grew up in a simple home where money was always something we had to think about before anything else. That shaped me more than I realized at the time. I told myself I would never live like that again, that I would build something so strong and so stable that no one in my family would ever feel that kind of uncertainty. I think that is where it started for me. Not with greed, but with fear dressed up as ambition. I worked more than I slept for most of my adult life. I learned how to read people in business rooms, how to make decisions quickly, how to take risks that others hesitated to take. There were years when everything I touched seemed to turn into opportunity. Deals came faster, numbers grew larger, and at some point I stopped counting carefully because it all started to feel endless. People would congratulate me, shake my hand, call me successful, and I believed them. I really did. I built a life that looked impressive from the outside. A good home, investments, respect in my field, and enough money that I never had to worry again. I remember thinking one evening, sitting alone in a large room that was too quiet for its size, that I had finally done it. I had escaped the life I grew up in. But that night, instead of feeling peace, I felt something I could not name at the time. It was not sadness exactly, it was emptiness, like something important had been left behind without me noticing. My marriage did not survive the pace I was living. I told myself it was temporary, that once I reached a certain level of stability, I would slow down and be present again. But life does not wait for those promises. My children grew up in the background of my success, and I missed more of their lives than I like to admit out loud even now. I was there in name, in responsibility, in provision, but not in the way that matters when a child looks for a father in the room. I used to think providing was enough. I thought love could be measured in what you built and what you left behind financially. But years later, I realized my children did not need my money as much as they needed my attention when it mattered. By the time I understood that, they were already grown, already shaped by my absence more than my intentions. There were moments when I tried to fix things. I would call, send gifts, suggest visits that did not always happen. The conversations were polite but distant, like people who are related but no longer fully connected. That distance hurt more than I expected. I had spent my whole life learning how to close business deals, but I never learned how to close emotional gaps once they opened. As I got older, the pace of my life slowed, but my thoughts did not. Retirement gave me time, and time gave me silence. And in that silence, I started to notice everything I had ignored before. The way my home felt too large for one person. The way achievements on the wall stopped meaning anything after a while. The way my phone rarely rang unless it was about something practical, not personal. There were nights I would sit by the window and think about the younger version of myself. I do not blame him anymore, not fully. He thought he was doing the right thing. He thought sacrifice was the price of success, and that happiness would naturally follow once the work was done. But he never defined when done would be. One of the hardest truths I faced came quietly. I realized that I had trained myself to be needed professionally, but not personally. People valued my decisions, my money, my influence, but very few truly knew me. And over time I stopped offering that part of myself to anyone. It became easier to stay guarded, to stay busy, to stay focused on what could be controlled. I lost my wife many years before I stopped working. I was there at the end, but I often think about all the years before that when I was physically present, but emotionally somewhere else. That realization still stays with me, not as guilt that consumes me, but as understanding that comes too late to change anything. Now, at 88, I have everything I once chased, more than I ever imagined I would earn. And yet, I would trade much of it for simpler days where I chose presence over productivity, where I listened more than I planned, where I understood that time with people cannot be stored or recovered later. I do not say this to suggest that ambition is wrong. It is not. Building something in life matters. Working hard matters. But I wish someone had told me earlier that success without connection becomes a very quiet kind of loneliness. These days I spend most of my time thinking, remembering, and occasionally reaching out where I still can. Some calls are answered, some are not. I have learned to accept both without expecting too much in return. That acceptance took me a lifetime. If I could speak to anyone listening, especially someone who feels like they are still in the middle of building their life, I would not tell them to stop. I would only ask them to look up once in a while, to notice who is still there, to remember that the people around you are not waiting forever. Because in the end, I learned something simple but heavy. Money can change your life, but it cannot sit beside you when the house is quiet. And success can bring you to many places, but it does not always bring you back to yourself. And that is something I only understood clearly when it was already too late to change the path I had taken.